Well, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Let's get the link put up. Of course, today it will be slow. That's brilliant. Come on now. There it goes.
No worries. Hopefully, we can get some more people in here. I was going to
I'm working on it.
pull this out properly on my channel.
All right, folks. If anybody happens to get in here early, or if you're looking at this later, we are live now. We haven't started quite yet because we're sharing some links.
Hello, hello. What are you playing today, Farv?
Oh, that's just Double Dragon Gaiden in the background there.
Nice.
Mostly there's something on the video.
No, I was looking. I don't think I've ever seen you play this before.
Oh, it's been on the channel. I'll have to link it to you at some point or something. Alright, now I'll get this put in our Discords here. Won't be too much longer, folks. And obviously, if you're watching this after the fact, you can just fast forward this mess anyway.
Welcome to live streaming.
Pretty much.
I just posted this on my actual main page, so.
Alright, that'll work. Just about done myself in a couple other places to link it. And if you catch any background noise, it is the weekend and some of my neighbors are loud, so I'll just have to roll with it.
Loud how are they?
There's some people who got music on, and there's a lot of people driving around really loud.
Well, I mean, it's Saturday night. People got to unwind somehow.
Yeah, pretty much it. All right.
Am I coming across okay on the stream? Some of your game streams I noticed recently I sounded okay, so.
Yeah, you sound fine to me. Oh, I got already somebody asking about the game.
I see we have a Horatius in the chat.
Yes, we do. Also, my AC chose to kick in.
I can't hear anything on my end.
Oh, well, that works then. Yeah, I have the game audio down too, so I don't want too much interference. All right, so I guess we'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll just go ahead and start. People can always look at it later.
Yeah, lots of people come in here.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Apparently, I'm not sure how much overlap there is between Twitter and YouTube audiences.
Yeah.
If my promoting your channel on my Twitter is any indication, it's like none at all.
Yeah, well, we don't exactly have overlap in audiences either, so.
Slightly overlapping, I think. To give our listeners some background, some of whom may not know the story between us. Farv and I actually go way back. God, how long ago do we met back in 2018 over pissing and moaning about how awful Star Wars was?
Yeah, I think that's how it started. We didn't actually either one of us know that the other was a military veteran until afterward.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've been growing your game channel gradually, which I'm still I'm waiting for. My big goal here is you need to get up to 1,000 subs because I need to watch Josh play Getting Over It.
Oh yeah, he hasn't forgotten that either. He has not forgotten that at all.
Yeah, then you guys need to get there. Also,
Easier
his
said
Hogwarts
than done
Legacy
these days.
playthroughs are
Wow.
hilarious. So I think he's been doing those every 100.
Yeah. So if we hit the next 100, yeah, he's got to play Hogwarts again. He's not looking forward to that either.
Yeah. But why does he not like that game?
Because he doesn't like Harry Potter. I mean, I barely understand it, to be fair.
I mean, it looks fun.
It's an okay game. It's kind of a... I'd call it, unless you're really into Harry Potter, it's kind of an average third-person action RPG kind of thing. So, if you're not in it for the lore, then it has a little less of an impact.
Yeah, it's I mean, I guess it looks like an interesting kind of adventure shooter game, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it.
So we are here tonight. Now, I suggested to Farv we do this on his channel because he has a YouTube channel. I wanted to do a stream on it.
Yeah, which is fair. It needs to be discussed by as many people as possible, really, because it's total bullshit.
And I didn't feel like turning my channel back on for it, so. Yeah. So recently there was. This came out. This came out in the last month. This was since Trump's been elected.
Yeah.
Recently there was a scandal that's erupted over over how the U.S. Army is spending basically money that's being deducted from soldiers' payrolls for on-base food services.
If you give me just a sec, I actually have a reference available here. Whoa.
Yep.
So there has been a total of, let's see, BAS, which is allowance for subsistence. It's your food budget. Is been grossly freaking kind of mishandled. There were $225 million worth of BAS collected from soldiers, and this is from 2024 financial records. This is coming from military.com, by the way, what I'm reading here. Only a fraction of that was actually spent on food budgets like it was supposed to be. So, of $225 million, which was meant all to go to defects, buying food, supplying food for soldiers, in particular soldiers on the base, only $151 million of that has gone to food, and that's across all the United States Army bases.
Well, that's actually it's actually worse than that because that's just on 11 bases. That's just on I think it's just on the BCT bases.
And what it says here, given that the Army operates 104 garrisons, now bear in mind what we're looking at is what's been recorded so far. But 104 garrisons.
This is like the tip of the iceberg that has emerged in terms of this scandal.
And of 104 garrisons, the amount of unspent funds is probably exponentially worse than this.
And this is just in the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
And just reporting from the 11 largest bases, which is, from the bases that are reported, it sounds to me like these are mostly bases that have brigade combat teams based at them.
Yeah, seemingly.
Not smaller posts, because they reported. The bases they reported were Fort Stewart, so that's 3rd Infantry Division.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Drum, which is 10th Mountain, Fort Carson, Fort ID, Fort Riley, Fort Bliss, the fort formerly known as Fort Hood, Texas.
I'm not calling that. It's Fort Hood as far as I'm concerned, because that's where I came out of. I don't give a fuck what they call it.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised they haven't renamed it again. Fort Bragg.
They should just change all the names, all the bases to Fort renamed by the Biden admin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that they already renamed Fort Bragg. They named it back. They changed it back from Fort Liberty, which was stupid. Yeah, Fort Campbell, Schofield Barracks, Fort Wainwright, and Fort Richardson. Those are all larger combat unit posts. It doesn't look like Fort Lewis is here, so I mean Fort Lewis is huge.
Yeah.
JBLM.
And apparently,
yeah.
The fort formerly known as Hood has been real bad about this for longer than, before this report even came out. There'd been complaints coming out of that base. So apparently, shortly after I left, it just went even more to hell.
Yeah. So just to kind of explain this to our listeners, anybody who's a veteran will be familiar with this. But essentially, if for junior enlisted soldiers, and actually this isn't even a junior enlisted thing. Everybody in the Army gets something called basic allowance for subsistence, and that's a addition to your base salary, which is used to is for you to feed yourself.
And the thing you have to remember about this is actually deducted from your pay. This is money you never get. It's literally subtracted from your pay.
Well, so it's subtracted from your pay for junior enlisted soldiers who live in base housing. For senior people, which we come from very different backgrounds, because you were a junior enlisted when you were in the Army, and I was an officer.
Yeah.
For senior people, so basically people who live outside of the barracks, which is generally E6 and above, that money is just given to them as a bonus to their paycheck. But for E5 and below, and basically anybody who lives in the barracks, they never see that money. It's automatically deducted from their paycheck.
In that regard, I technically got lucky, at least the second time around, because I was a geographical bachelor and I lived off post. But
yeah, and also the way that junior soldiers actually get paid this money is a lot of the times what happens is they get married and they move off post, and that qualifies them for separate rations. Which is, by the way, a substantial incentive for a lot of junior soldiers to get married, because it's not a trivial amount of money.
Not comparatively, especially in particular. But just looking at that reference I had there, let's see.
I mean, it's about $15 a day. I want to say it's a decent amount.
So let's see. Fort Stewart, Georgia, report that soldiers contributed $17 million to BAS. Fort Stewart, Georgia, spent $2.1 million of that on food.
Yeah. So Fort Stewart, which is crazy to me, and they're soldiers based at Fort Stewart collected, paid in $17 million into the system. Yet the people who actually run the chow hole at Fort Stewart came back and only spent $2.1 million worth of food. The rest of this money disappeared into the operations and maintenance budget.
87% of their money is just...
Yeah, it just disappeared into the O&M budget, which is kind of a slush fund.
Yeah.
And apparently the Army hasn't been able to account for it.
Well, honestly, I don't think they ever will, because I don't think they ever bothered to account for it, because the prior administration didn't exactly prioritize some of the functions of the military unless it was incredibly convenient to them. So brass were kind of allowed to take whatever money and put it wherever. And a lot of the time that meant personal projects or upkeep to favored, company functions or brigade functions or God knows what else.
It was especially in the Biden administration, I want to say, where which was the impression I got of the Biden era military was that corruption was starting to starting to seep down to the day-to-day function of the military. So, I mean, we were spending so much money and not procuring anything.
Look at the mess with General Milley, and I think that's pretty indicative of what kind of problems were going on there.
Yeah.
And
also we had the Secretary of Defense was formerly General Austin, who was who actually needed a waiver to become Secretary of Defense because he'd so recently been in the military.
Yeah.
There's actually a law stating that uniformed service members can't be appointed to that position within so long of their retirement. He was violating.
I mean, technically, if you look at all the issues we've discussed before about the Quartermaster's Corps, it's supposed to be against the regs to arrange to get on the board of somewhere like Springfield Armory when you're still in service, and yet it was still happening.
It happens. It was happening. It's just become systematic.
Yeah.
And moreover, you had somebody who himself had been feeding at the trough, who was placed in charge of guarding the hen house.
Mm-hmm.
General Austin, who, I mean, he was on the board of Raytheon, if I recall correctly.
Probably, it would not surprise me.
Many other positions. I mean, you think he's remotely interested in reforming the senior officer gravy train? Probably not.
One would not think so, because that directly affects him at that point. And the problem is so much of this, in the worst possible way, was so politically motivated. It was all about, promoting their post-military career or putting money into things they wanted done specifically, not the well-being of the soldiers, which is especially fucking egregious when you consider that the soldiers were paying for it.
Yeah, it's just really, I mean, frankly, I think it's really unacceptable that, this is funding which the Army is withholding from soldiers for the purposes of feeding them, and they're only spending a fraction of it. And I mean, okay, if the results of their only spending a fraction of it were, soldiers were getting world-class food, and, then at most we could be discussing, well, maybe they need to cut the amount they're taking out. But no, there over the last, essentially since COVID, there have been consistent complaints across the Army. I'm not sure about the other services, but I know across the Army that on-post chow service has gone down the tubes in a bad way. And
it's unacceptable.
I mean, now unfortunately, I'm like, well, fortunately or unfortunately, man, I got out of the Army by and large, before COVID hit.
Yeah, and so did I.
So I mean, I guess I don't have personal experience as far as what the general chow hall zeitgeist is right now, but from the rumors,
I haven't seen or heard much good coming from it. I did a little bit more looking around at social media posts, and Angry Cops did that big video on it just like earlier this week, where he had information that had been sent to him, and not to mention the stuff that came from Hots and Cots. It's not looking too good.
I mean, it's not looking good at all. I recall he discussed I think it was an email he got, or some kind of posting from actually it sounded like it was from a field grade logistician at one of these affected posts.
Yeah, who remained anonymous for obvious reasons because he's still active duty.
Although it probably with some mild detective work, you'd figure out who that is. There's not a lot of people working in the G4.
Yeah, although it's against his policies to do that, and I don't blame him. It keeps people honest.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting he should have doxed the guy. I'm just saying whoever. It wouldn't take a lot of detective work to figure out who that guy was. This was a post where, due to basically completely foreseeable staffing issues, because they were sending one brigade to NDC and deploying another to Europe, I want to say. Mm-hmm. They created a situation in which they had no cooks on post, basically the number of cooks they had on post was very low, totally inadequate to basically man the chow halls on post and feed the very large number of soldiers who remained there. And there were like significant hours cuts, and people couldn't get to. And I mean, and soldiers could not. It was completely impractical for soldiers to get to chow.
There's something else that was brought up by a commenter in Angry Cop's original video, taken with a grain of salt because we can't prove their identity, but it stated as such: as a soldier stationed at Fort Campbell, I knew exactly where the money went. The Army started to hire a contracting company to replace the soldiers working at the dining facility starting around 2005. Before that, there were 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. After the contractors took over, Saturday only served brunch and dinner. Sunday and all holidays, the DFAC was closed. And who's the owner of this contracting company? Some politician's family. Most of the money went to the contracting company. When you used soldiers as cooks, there were no extra expenses. They were already paid for serving as a soldier, and all expenses go to the facility maintenance and food service. Now you're having to pay for employees, insurance, company operations, and revenue.
Yeah, which
and
is
contractors
ridiculous.
Is kind of an issue. You used to have army cooks for a friggin' reason.
Yeah, every unit in the army has some number of. I mean, like every battalion in the army has some number of cooks assigned to it to serve as cooks, and those people all get sucked into the chow hall and do their work there.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that like you're literally hiring. I mean, the fact that you're literally hiring a contractor to do work that the army. The army literally has cooks on the MTO to perform those duties. I mean, the only way I could explain something like that is by corruption.
Yeah, I don't see much excuse. It's friggin' ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. I wrote a few posts on this on Twitter a little while ago. And I mean, beyond the obvious funding issues. Because yeah, I mean, beyond the obvious funding issues here, which is that there's, I mean, none of the posts that reported spent barely more than 50% of the money they had collected off food.
And of the reported ones, it was literally just barely half.
Yeah, there were two posts which did a relatively good job, which was Fort Bliss and I want to say was it Bragg?
Yeah, it was. Weirdly enough, I think it was Bragg. Which,
like
given all the other mismanagement in Bragg, I'm stunned.
Yeah, that's surprising, but it's surprising that Fort Bragg is good at doing anything. But yeah, and Fort Richardson did all right. That's a smaller post, but Fort Bliss, I know, actually had Fort Bliss when I was stationed there had noticeably better defects than other posts I'd been to because there was a policy of Fort Bliss. Which was the post duty officer, which is a job I did on a number of occasions. Yeah. Like the duty officer had to eat at the DFAC, all three of his meals that day, and he had to write a report on it. And so that kind of kept the DFACs there honest.
Yeah, and I will say, even back when I was still before I got out in 2006, I noticed an issue on Fort Hood where sometimes they just have a defect and they would just decide it wasn't open.
Yeah, but we had that problem at Bliss, which was like there were defects out there but they would randomly close.
Mm-hmm. No explanation, they just be closed.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes it was some unit deployed, but a lot of the times it was not even a unit deployed, like a unit went to the field. But a lot of the times they weren't closing like that unit's defect down. They'd close, a heavily subscribed defect down for some strange reason.
Like, it's been too long for me to remember which one's which, but I remember on Bragg on Hood, Bragg was my wife's base. There was one defect everybody liked better than the other one, but you could hardly ever get into it because it was closed so damn often.
Yeah. And I mean, not to mention, it's not like soldiers have... it's not like soldiers have a ton of time to plan their culinary schedules.
Well, and a lot of time you have guys who they live on post, number one, So you got a guy who lives in the barrack. A lot of these guys don't have a POV. They don't have a car,
Yeah.
And so they got to bumper ride with somebody else. And then you get to like the one defect in range of you, and either they run out of food or they're so freaking busy because they're understaffed and the other defect's not open. You've got like an hour to do everything and get back to work.
Yeah, because I mean, you try to go to the defect in the morning. And everyone's just gotten out of PT. There's an enormous line, and not to mention you're expecting soldiers basically to take their hour and a half to go. Eat, do all their hygiene, get dressed, and
like there was a post.
It creates a problem.
There was a post. Let me see if I can find it. There was a post from I believe it was an NCO, Okay, I can't find it right now, but
No,
they were told basically because a guy brought up the logistics issue of it because the defect that had closed was the one that was near a lot of the troops where they worked
yeah,
and near the barracks. The nearest post was 30 minutes, or on the post, the nearest defect was 30 minutes away. And
that's crazy.
when he brought that up, we're like, well, they just should go to that one. And he's like,
Like you,
yeah, he's like, the logistics of that is ridiculous. They're 30 minutes away. He's like, some of these guys don't have vehicles. And they're like, well, they could just walk it. And he was like, you're expecting them to walk down there and back and get back in time. He's like, this is ridiculous. And it basically boiled down to the people he brought it up to were like, well, that isn't really our problem.
I mean, it's going to be their problem when nobody freaking re-enlists.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, you want to know why? Because that's another problem the Army's been having. It's been having a retention problem. The Army has not been having a recruitment problem. It can't retain the soldiers it's got.
Yeah.
And, well, a lot of that is conditions of service.
So Fort Carson, November of last year, I believe, reported that they were having pervasive food shortages. Yeah, there's actually a photo going around. It's like a glass of milk, a piece of buttered piece of toast, and lima beans on a plate.
Yeah, like how do you even? How is there not a mutiny if this is even remotely real, right? I mean, maybe it's fake, but like if this is real, how is there not a mutiny?
Yeah,
that's insane. And not to mention I mean, soldiers get 3 meals a day taken out of their salary. The junior enlisted soldiers, which means that they're if they're having to feed themselves, like they're not going to reimburse for that. And not to mention, in a lot of these bases, even like non-defac options aren't very high.
And it's like it's clear that there's been a lot of damage done by the previous administration's handling and appointments of certain military officers, high-ranking military officers, and whatnot. Especially when you look at, like, they literally just had to do a thing where they were basically purging what are obviously politically biased trans military officers from the Army.
Yeah, I saw they got rid of a bunch of
getting rid of a bunch of them. And if you look at their policies or any of their history, they're all very leftist. They're all kind of painfully anti-military. A lot of them don't like the country.
Seem to have gotten, yeah, I think that kind of all people who are like,
and I feel
kind of political appointees almost.
Yeah, exactly. And incoming administration's got so much work to do. Because just giving you another example of how bad this is. Hots and Cots and several other outlets tried to get a hold of people, and what I got here is, and this is on military.com, again, Army officials declined to answer detailed or even broad questions about how so much money is diverted and how budgets for food are decided. The service also declined to make any senior officials available on the record for any interviews. Major Andrea Kelly, an Army spokesperson, told Military.com in a statement that the service only uses funds, quote, needed to feed the projected number of meals based on previous head counts, meaning historic attendance at dining facilities dictates how much food is purchased. That's not a good way to handle that.
That sounds like bullshit for one.
Yeah, that obviously sounds like bullshit, but it's also
two. Well, here's the thing, which is so the BAS being deducted is everybody living in the barracks.
Yep.
It's 3 meals a day for everybody living in the barracks. So what? You're going to tell me that 75% of the barracks population eats less than 1 meal a day at the DFAC? That's a problem, guy.
And here's the conflicting report. In the past, service officials pointed to a perceived lack of attendance at Army dining facilities, saying resources are continually stripped because of a perception of dwindling interest. However, reports from service members frequently describe undercooked meat, unseasoned meals, lack of any fresh ingredients, and unhealthy menu options. The substandard and sometimes seemingly dangerous food in turn leads to fewer soldiers using the facilities, which causes a downward spiral that results in even less money spent on meals.
Yeah, and
we've seen this before.
Yeah. And first of all, it's genuine. I mean, to me, it's genuinely concerning if that's their justification is, well, we're buying based on head count. Well, for one, if that's your actual head count, if the money being spent reflects your actual head count, and you're only planning on feeding less than one meal per day to your soldier, to every soldier who lives in the barracks, which is how much. Well, these people are all obviously eating. Where else are they eating? Yeah. Because here's the problem: I know on Fort Bliss, all the soldiers, all the people who were in the BCTs, like the First Armored Division part of the post, that's on East Post. Now Fort Bliss has a really big, really nice PX. On West Post, 20 minutes away by car. Yeah. Right, and the reason the thing is, like, that PX is right where all like the senior officers and like senior NCOs' families live, and like the historic housing. It's like right in walking distance.
It's the nicest part of the post where all the people with money live, basically.
Yeah, like that's where the PX is. Out in the desert, man, there is not a lot.
And the issue, the issue here also is, not only looking at from past experience, but from what I've seen recently and what I saw around places like Bragg when my wife was still in, it's pause this again. It's irritating because if you are a soldier in the barracks, your options are so limited, especially let's say if you're from like E1 to E4.
Oh yeah.
You could go to the PX and buy food, but you ain't gonna be able to do nothing with it. The most you can have in your barracks room is a freaking microwave. So you're just going to be getting microwave meals at best. That's why the defect's there, because you ain't got a kitchen.
Yeah. Cooking facilities in the barracks are very limited.
Yeah.
And actually, this also goes into it. Speaking of that, this reminded me of another thing I wanted to talk about, which is the Army. Even since like I was a brand new lieutenant, right? And I think you were about to get out. The Army has been pushing this line basically of like, oh, our soldiers are elite athletes, and we should treat our troops all athletes. Okay, great.
So you want to push this
feeding troops?
It's like you want to push this top draw physical standard, which by the way half the time is complete bullshit, and they just use a very selected pool of people to quote unquote look the standard. But you're not feeding anybody enough to freaking do that kind of exercise.
Yeah, you see, there's certainly plenty of people you see in the Army who are in amazing shape, but guess what? A lot of them are senior guys.
Yeah, and then also a lot of them are, they're eating not in the DFAC. They're spending their own money to eat. And when you're a lower enlisted guy, spending your own money to eat's fine and good if you live in the barracks, but that shit still gets expensive.
Yeah, soldiers don't make a lot of money. Not in the slightest.
And it was bad enough, like, my friend, when I got out, our neighbor was a friend of mine who was on Bragg, and he was an E2, I think.
Yeah.
They were on food, they were having to get food stamps because they had a baby.
That's nuts. Like, I know there
was a couple times their finances were so bad, we had to actually give them money because they didn't have enough to feed their kid.
Jesus. They just had the one kid.
Yeah,
that's crazy, man.
And like my brother said, even when he was there, his dad was a sergeant major, and there were times that they were helping feed some of the guys out of pocket because they weren't getting enough to eat.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. A lot of, especially younger soldiers who are. Who might have families, they really don't make a lot of money.
No,
really not enough to support a family. In fact, I was I always kind of felt bad about my living situation when I was living in Bliss, because I'm not sure if you could do it when you were in, but basically when I was in, you could. This is sort of because of how the regulations work.
Yeah.
Around like on-base housing, you can rent on-base housing commercially in some instances.
I don't remember that ever being a thing, but I never looked into it, so that could have been 100% on me.
They don't really advertise it.
Yeah.
But basically, at Bliss, I was able to commercially rent a unit in on-base housing. I was living with kind of in the specialist housing. I was a captain at the time. But I was thinking, I know what the BAS rate, the BAH rate was. Which, by the way, if you want to talk about a scandal that hasn't brewed up yet, is okay. The Army is taking Like, what is the Army doing with BAH collected from soldiers who are living in on-base housing?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a scandal that hasn't brewed up yet, because like that's a lot more money.
Ugh.
And there have been horror stories coming out about on-base housing for some time now, of it just not being maintained. But I mean, I knew there were soldiers around me who were paying for like E4s with families. That was why they were in housing.
Yeah.
And I knew what their BAH rate was, and I was like, they're paying more than I am for this, and they've got. I mean, I'm a single guy. They had multiple mouths to feed.
Yeah.
It's like this doesn't seem very doesn't seem like leadership here is really taking care of the troops that well.
Or at all, really, in some cases. And I understand, because we've all seen it, those of us who don't stick our heads in the sand, that, the last administration wasn't exactly military friendly. They wanted to talk about, this war and that war a lot of time, but they never wanted to talk about the logistics of the people who actually have to do the actual work.
Yeah, that they wanted to they liked rattling the saber, but they didn't want to take care of the people whose hands held the saber.
Yeah. And that was a big problem I just kept seeing. And I talked to some guys and I saw it, and I saw this even just a few years ago when my wife was still at Bragg. I'd see it, not just from politicians, but even from some of the officers' corps. It's like, you guys, some of you don't do anything that has anything to do with this shit, so you blow it off. It's not important. It's obviously not important because you're not dealing with it. So
yeah, it's like, what the hell are you guys doing? And also, why do you think it's like, are these guys are they foisting this stuff off onto the NCO Corps? Also doesn't give them much of a damn.
Sometimes
it's like, how on earth do you have these Well, here's the thing, that I mean, who should be most heavily invested in the quality of food that soldiers are receiving? It's going to be a bunch of people. It's going to be a bunch of sergeant majors.
Yeah.
Right. What? Why was the Army's sergeant major corps, all these posts, not raising holy hell over this?
Well, the funny thing is back in 2020, they did have a sergeant major fighting about that, and bureaucracy just kept screwing him over. He was demanding revision. He was demanding the soldiers get fed better, get healthier food, and it got all wrapped up in bureaucracy, and then COVID happened, and they just shut it all down.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the thing is, like, that's one guy.
Yeah. Well, he was very high ranking. I think he was like the sergeant major of the Army at the time, but politicians they bogged everything down, and when COVID happened, they were conveniently able to just push it aside and completely ignore it.
Yeah.
And as my brother said, he blames both the senior enlisted and the brass. Yeah, and in a lot of cases, it's true. Because the senior enlisted, a lot of time, they're not dealing with this shit.
They really are. And I mean, there's a lot of senior enlisted who they will lecture you endlessly about taking care of soldiers. Well, man, they don't give a damn.
No.
Like, it's unfortunate, but they, like, I mean, I've complained about this before. The Army, like, the Army, like, really does. The Army's done a really bad job of holding its own NCO Corps to standards lately.
Yeah.
Even since I've been, as far back as 2010 when I came in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had NCOs who didn't know how the hell to do their jobs, didn't care about their soldiers.
I saw plenty of that. There was an E6 in my wife's unit who never should have got his 6. He shouldn't even have had his 5. But he massaged the right egos and did favors to the right freaking people higher ranking than him.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in, it was... I mean, God, I remember showing up in my first unit as a brand new lieutenant who shouldn't have known anything. And I realized to my horror, like, oh my God, my NCOs actually don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, like when I was in ordnance in the Cav,
who didn't know what they were up to.
When I was in ordnance in the Cav, RE6 Staff Sergeant Marone, he knew his shit. He knew everything. He knew all the paperwork. He knew how to get things done. He was the guy who would tell a colonel to piss off if he was not doing something by the regs, and he wouldn't get into trouble because he was right.
Yeah.
And then when he's gone, we got this new E5 who got promoted to take our E6's place, which would have been fine, except our E7 had no idea. Because he was from a completely different unit, wasn't ordnance, wasn't EOD, I don't remember what he was, supply or something, some clerical thing. And they put him in charge of our section, and the guy was clueless. So he would just
he had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah, he would sit up at the orderly room all day, and then the orderly room would assume we weren't busy, and they'd task us with a bunch of bull crap that supply didn't want to do because he sat around in the orderly room all day looking like an idiot.
Why am I not surprised?
And it's that kind of crap. It's like, if you don't know how to do your job, fine. I wasn't an expert at my damn job, but, ask somebody, do something.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know how to do your damn job, learn how to do your job. Everyone in the army is always learning how to do stuff. Like, it's not unusual, but I mean,
because like being a soldier on its own, combat arms wise, because I've done that, it is difficult enough in practice. But it's like when you get to the logistical shit, the in garrison, not deployed shit, that's where a lot of the complicated shit comes up. Honestly. Is trying to make anything work when you're back in the freaking States.
Yeah, like, I mean, when you're, when you're in a position where stuff doesn't fall out of the sky for you.
Yeah.
Or where people don't really care, and it's like, well, I mean, God, I remember I had the hardest time once trying to get one of my sergeants to figure out the maintenance system enough to fix his own damn Bradley.
Oh, God.
It's like, dude, I need you to fix this one box in your Bradley so I can talk to you while we're out in the field and on the battlefield also. Mm-hmm. like, can you please fix your comm, Sergeant? And this guy, couldn't crack the code on it. I don't know what was going on, but he.
And there is, as my brother pointed out, unfortunately, and I don't know if you saw this considering when you got in, but around the time I got out in 2006. Was at the point when the Obama administration was doing what they called the thinning out of the ranks.
Lovely.
And it's the reason why I got hosed on some of my VA benefits, because what they would do is anything they could get you out as quick as they could on, that's what they would do. Because Obama was trying to reduce military costs.
Lovely.
So around 2005 to 2006, a lot of guys just got kind of pushed out the fucking door. And so what happened is a lot of the old NCO Corps enlisted guys like me who were, just getting together 5 and all this shit. We were the ones who they'd be like, oh, yeah, we don't need them. Just, let their time run out, met them out, do what the fuck ever, blah, blah, blah. And then they run short of NCOs because, of course, they fucking do later because of doing shit like this.
It's like, oh no, what about it? It's like, then, look at the inevitable consequences of my own actions.
Yeah. And then you got to promote these guys who they're just doing the bare minimum, or they're being shady fucks just because they know it'll get them promoted. As my brother put it, after Obama thinned out the old NCO Corps, plenty of yes men got promoted.
Yeah, and actually, I think that was something I was dealing with after you got out, which was I came in and it rapidly became apparent to me that the war on terror had just rotted out the NCO Corps.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened.
We also lost a lot of our mid-grade officers who were actually knowledgeable about what the fuck they were doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, tons of people got QMP'd. I remember one time my brigade at Bliss, they got some battalion got 3 of their commanders QMP'd in the same cycle.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Since we can say the word now, when the COVID shit happened, a lot of guys got put out because, I don't want to get the jab because it might not be a good idea. It might be against my religion. And you had all these guys who got fucking thrown the hell out against their will because they wouldn't get a shot.
Oh yeah, that was I remember that. That was I finished getting out right around the very tail end of that.
Yeah, and so you lose a bunch of guys. You lose a bunch of guys who give a shit again for that.
Yeah, and by the way, a lot of these guys were the people who were independent thinkers, and by the way, they've all been completely vindicated at this point.
Oh yeah. And it's total dog shit, but it didn't say, it didn't fix the problems that inevitably frickin' caused.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Like Torshi said, Russian and Chinese soldiers are eating better, which is real shameful on the same losers who let the Afghanistan surrender happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. And I mean, and this is something which everybody noticed during the war, which was, for some reason, like dining facilities that deployed right downrange, they were all amazing.
They were pretty damn good comparatively, yeah. Because they
were
run by fucking soldiers most of the time. The cooks were actually working.
And yeah, they had funding and they had resources and there was some passion behind it. And I mean, the thing that always killed me was, okay, if we know for a fact the army can do this right because they've done it right.
Yeah,
they had all these deployed posts in very austere conditions, by the way, where soldiers were actually getting fed properly. And how is it that we can't have that quality of service in garrison? What is preventing us from doing this?
Unfortunately,
the go-to answer is always funding. Oh, we don't have the deployment money. Bullshit. And you're only spending a fraction of the money you take in from BAS, so the money's out there.
And that's what I was going to say is the issue is that the funding excuse always comes down to politics. Politics are so pervasive in military operations beyond a certain fucking set of ranks. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And there's this is you think this would be the most basic thing in the world, right?
You'd hoped, at least.
But apparently it's not. Another thing I talked about, I wrote a few posts on this a little while ago. I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
Another thing I talked about is army cooks. Cooks are, I mean, they're incredibly overworked, and also their requirements to become a cook are very, very low. It's one of the few MOSs that has a minimum ASVAB score requirement.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, there's essentially it's like the rock bottom of the aptitude.
Yikes.
Scale, as far, and it's like, and all these people are very overworked. I mean, I always felt bad for the cooks.
Yeah, I remember the cooks being pretty stressed out a lot of the time.
Yeah, like there are people who get just absolutely no respect from anybody, and those guys would be at the chow hall cooking at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
like, do you guys get time off? Or they'd have some crazy PT schedule, and you'd see them.
Yeah. Oh god.
You'd see them like working out at noon or something, because that's when they like.
Yeah, when they have a chance to do anything.
Yeah. And it's like, so these people get like, this is an incredibly low aptitude MOS who gets crazy overworked, gets no respect. Like nobody cares about them. They most of their units don't see or care about them because they're assigned to such and such a unit, but they're really just kind of tasked out to the defect most of the time. Their actual leadership never sees them. It's like, how much of this is a morale problem among army cooks? I mean, clearly not all of it, but I think a lot of it is.
And I don't see, apart from the obvious solutions of just auditing everyone. I know it's become a dirty word with the Democrats recently after the whole Doge thing, but I think short of auditing everyone and finding out who's actually responsible, or at least stopping the problem, I don't see a whole much of a solution.
Yeah, it's well, and I think the solution here is that garrison commanders, which, by the way, you want to talk about a bunch of underappreciated full-bird colonels, like people who are like dead-ending their careers.
Not like, inaccurate in some cases.
Guys who are like the dead end of their careers, they're like, yeah, man, the army hasn't made me retire yet. I'm the garrison commander of this base, whatever. It's like, those are the people who actually need to step up and like fix this, because they're the people who like control the food budget.
Yeah, basically.
It's like, well, Okay, Colonel gonna retire soon. Can you and Sergeant Major gonna retire soon? I'll like strap your army pants on
It's like,
here.
look,
And
I get
fix
you might be
this.
short timing it, but like this post needs to operate.
Yeah,
And it certainly
like
doesn't need money being reappropriated where it doesn't belong to get tucked away for some asshole to use for something else later.
Yeah, and like you might have to go, I don't know, argue with the commanders of real units who, I don't know, want to have their cooks tasked out for whatever thing they wanted to do, which which is I mean, I was talking about this earlier, which is every unit in the army has cooks assigned to it. So how the hell are we short of cooks?
Well, I don't, in that one I don't know. It's because they're getting tasked out to places they don't fucking belong, or they're literally getting set aside because they're like, oh well, we're just going to contract this defect. Fuck off.
It's ridiculous. Like the army should be able to, according to its own table of organization, feed itself. So how are we? I mean, so clearly there's a lot of cooks who are just not cooking. And despite the fact that something that needs to happen all the time in all circumstances.
In my brother's case, I'll read this and then I'll respond to it. My brother says, to a degree, I suspect it's less politics and more skimming these funds into general post funds. Yes, but I do kind of count that as a form of politics because they're allowed to do it. And let's be real, somebody else knows they're doing it when it happens.
And here's the other thing, which is, so apparently the army has known about this and been doing it for some time, which is, at what point did somebody in the army internally blow the whistle on this? Right? Did anybody in the army internally think like it's not okay that we're either skimming or potentially somebody is embezzling large amounts of money that's being deducted out of BAS?
Yeah.
Like what? Where was finance in this? I'm curious as to what like the finance's opinion of this.
And it's like I almost have to assume, and it's an assumption, mind you, not stating this fact, that somebody in finance was in on it. I mean, because how the fuck do you do this without finance figuring it out?
I mean, I don't think it's somebody in finance was in. I think a lot of people in finance.
Yeah, well, I'm talking like command level.
Yeah, I understand. Like this is apparently just standard practice in the army. Like we're just gonna deduct all this money and put it into the O&M fund and forget about it. I mean, there are very senior people who are implicated.
Just Yeah, I'm not gonna do this all night. I'm not gonna harp on this all night.
Torchy had a good one here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long you want to go. We're getting close to an hour.
Yeah, we're gonna cut here soon. We've done our rant. I just feel like more people need to be talking about this, and some people are, to be fair. And Hots and Acots has brought it up. And of course, the problem is with all the stuff going on in politics at the White House and the revisions of the Army right now, a lot of people are trying to duck slings and arrows, so to speak. So who knows who's going to talk to who at this point until shit is done getting shuffled around. But yeah.
Torchy made a joke about the stories of the vegan menu for vegan soldiers real, and apparently they were.
Oh God.
I saw that while I was doing the research for some posts on Twitter earlier. There were defects in like Germany and I think other locations which were just trumpeting the fact that they were like providing vegan options. Which I mean did you ever know a vegan during your time in the military?
No.
Ever?
Not once.
Yeah, like I was a
I knew one guy
for most of my time in.
I knew one guy who I kind of suspected might be, but actually wasn't. But that was the only one time ever.
Yeah, like I spent the vast majority of my career as a captain, and I knew a lot of soldiers, and I never met a vegan. Like I didn't even know a lot of people who have like dietary restrictions of any kind, but I never met a vegan. And there were people who thought that vegan meals in the DFAC was a priority. This is something they should be putting attention towards. I think you could count the number of vegans in the army on your fingers.
like I knew one guy who I think had like a dairy thing.
Yeah.
And to to his credit, he was like this rich kid who got in because he wanted to. Yeah. He didn't need the money. He just wanted to join the army. He wanted to do something else rather than the family business. Like, okay, you know what? Respect for that. And I think he's the only person I ever met that even had like a particular food allergy when I was in either time. Just
yeah, it's just absolutely nuts. So, anyways, yeah, you're making noises. You wanted to wrap this up. I mean, I think heads need to roll, and this needs to be reformed.
Yeah, this definitely. I'm hoping this goes to Pete Hegseth, and this gets taken seriously because obviously the money that's been spent ain't gonna magically get brought back. But this shit needs to be fixed for the foreseeable future. Because the guys out there doing the shit that we did should be getting fed better. They should be getting taken care of better. There's no fucking excuse for this. I don't care if it's politics, bureaucracy, what the fuck ever. It doesn't belong and it shouldn't be fucking happening.
Preach it.
And that's going to be it for us tonight, folks. Thanks for joining us. I know we don't do these too often, especially on the weekends. It was something we just felt we ought to talk about and need a little bit more exposure as small as we are here. Thanks for joining me, AW. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if we have any new listeners here, please like and subscribe because Favre's brother needs to play Getting Over It. And that isn't going to happen until he gets another 347 subscribers. So.
Yeah, that. Or, just get us up to the next 100 so he has to play Hogwarts again because he'll love that.
Yeah.
Have a great.
Once you hit your 1,000 subscribers, Raid Shadow Legends is going to sponsor you. So.
Oh God, no! I already told people I'm not doing this shit. I don't do sponsorships anyway. It's too much strings attached. Have a great night, everybody.
Night, everyone. Take care.